Yes, yes, I'm actually just giving lessons. 2 books from this place, 2 books from this place. And you gave a list of what networks I have. And everything is like 2 from here, 1 from there. Give them a list of 15.
When she comes to Houston, and I bring her here.
How's everybody doing this fine, beautiful day?
Great.
Oh, I thought it was better. It's not ice, it's not snow outside.
That's what we're hoping for.
That's exactly. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Really, this is an outstanding exhibit. We're so glad to be able to share this with you. The staff have been working very hard for many weeks to make sure to make this all happen. And we're looking forward to your input and any questions and things you have. This evening, Carlin will be to do the introduction.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to host this exhibit from Bullock, Texas, from the Texas State History Museum. The Bullock, Texas State History Museum. We are joined by the Houston Public Library Family Research Center at Clayton Library with Irene Walters. And we have Alfonso Duncan and, I'm so sorry,
Brian.
Brian Cosgrove from the Houston Maritime Museum joining us. So we're super excited to have them. A quick introduction for this exhibit and sort of why we're here. We wanted to highlight Galveston as an immigration port, which was a great start of Texas immigrants coming to Texas and to the Midwest. It was a deep water port, and it welcomed many people, from Germans, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Italians, and Jewish refugees. At that time, Czech immigrants began arriving to Galveston in the mid-late 18th century for farmland and economic opportunities. By the early 1900s, Czech communities thrived across Texas. And as we all know, if you're from Texas and have Czech genealogy, those Czech language traditions and family identity remains today here. So I'm going to turn it off to Alfonso and Irene. Alfonso has a little bit of a presentation for us. Other than that, I encourage you guys to ask questions. These guys are very smart, very nerdy, and they're very great. So thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. I don't see her. Oh, thank you, Johanna and Carlene, for inviting us to the Czech Museum. The Czech Museum is a very important part of my life. Here is where my wife realized that Houston was not just barbecues and cowboys, but also a place where Czechs settled and thrived. This is a presentation that I made for the Czech Heritage Society 4 years ago, and it's about ships. So I start with the early arrivals. The early arrivals are people that came because of a priest. Reverend Bergman arrived to Cut Springs because the Germans living in Cut Springs wanted a spiritual leader, and they asked for one, and lo and behold, they sent Reverend Bergman, who was from Moravia. And when he arrives in Cut Springs, he realizes that there is a lot of land, cheap, good land, and he starts writing to his friends and family and saying, come on over. There's good land here. But keep in mind that Moravia, the Czechlands, were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were serfs, basically. Most of the Czechs that came didn't have that much money, if any money at all, but they came and prospered. So what we have here is what I'm trying to show here is from where do they come? They come mostly from here, and at the beginning, they made it to Hamburg or Bremen or Bremerhaven, one way or another. I haven't studied it well, the early one in 1846, whether they used the river to Prague, okay, and then the Elbe all the way to Hamburg, or later on they used rail, but that was after the trains were used. I'm showing how it could have been the way to get to Prague. Prague, if the ones that have been there have a peculiarity. It has rapids. Okay, so in those days, ships couldn't make it upstream from Prague. You could make it downstream, and that's it. It's like Honda in Colombia, or other cities that have been the grew where rapids are. Is a place where you transfer goods from one ship to another because they couldn't negotiate the traffic, the rapids. Now, the German society that brings Germans, because basically the Czechs, if I can put it this way, were piggybacking on the Germans, was I'm not going to say it in German, it's the Society for the Protection of German Immigrants, which was a business venture. Now, why? Why do Germans want to come to Texas? Well, basically the question is, why not? Texas was lacked people to work the land, but Germans were importing a lot of cotton from Texas, and hides from Texas, and wood from Texas. So they needed people to, grow cotton like the Americans did, but they were shipping cotton to a region of Germany that at that time was a textile manufacturing area. My last name is Duncan, and one thing that I learned from my Duncans living in Virginia was that they were bringing Osnabrück. Now, anybody can tell me what Osnabrück is? Well, does somebody know what denim is? Well, it's the same. Denim is the textile that comes from Nimes, France. Osnabrück is the German textile equivalent to denim. It was used for making the clothes for slaves. It had to take a lot of wear and tear, okay? And you can wear, I have jeans that are, 10 years old. So, and they were also used for manufacturing sails, okay? So the Germans started now I'm saying Germans, but they were not really Germans. Germany didn't exist at that time. what was called German lands were just a collection of principalities and a principality here, a principality there. Eventually, Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm puts it all together by the 1800s, and then it becomes Germany. But let's call them Germans, but they were not Germans, okay? So they started a group in central Germany, in what is now central Germany, with a company in Galveston, Kaufmann. Mr. Kaufmann was a big exporter of cotton, okay? He was a broker, and they were the ones making the money, by the way. It's like M.D. Anderson here in Houston. M.D. Anderson was not a doctor, was a cotton broker. They made a lot of money. So Mr. Kaufmann starts bringing German immigrants. Yeah. So the first group sails from Hamburg to Galveston via New Orleans. Okay. I talked to him about already, and this is Galveston, but later. At the beginning, Galveston had a problem. Galveston had a bar where the entrance of the Houston Ship Channel, there was a bar. The ships couldn't make it to the, sort of deep part of Galveston Bay where the ships could berth. Okay, so they had to put them in smaller ships and take them to the island. Later on, the dead bar is dredged, and then you have a port built, okay? And the ships made it to Galveston, but there was, at the beginning, it was not the way that the ships made it here. Made it to, say, Praha or Dubina or those places. From Galveston, they took a ship to Indianola that doesn't exist anymore. And from there, they walk all the way to their places where they wanted to live, or where they could get the land, okay? This is how Indianola looked like. It was just, a little hamlet. From there, they started walking. I mean, they had wagons, and they got oxen, and what have you, and go there. During the American Civil War, things stop, okay? The cotton remained an important export. The South needed cash, and cotton was a cash crop. Kaufmann continues with Runch, was another gentleman of Austrian origin that started in Indianola, and he also made money with cotton. And the North German Lloyd line starts coming to Galveston on a regular basis. Okay? At the beginning, the ships were on charter. Maybe Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, you take a ship and you rent it, okay? And you charge passengers, or you charge for the cargo, and you go from one place to another. Later on, the ships don't come on charter, they come on a regular basis as a service. Okay. Now, the embarkation point is Bremerhaven. This is a lithograph of the port and how the people get on the ship. Of course, now this is a fancy ship. this is not a bark. The shacks came in barks. Now, a bark would be different from this. This has 3 masts, and on the 3 masts you have square sails. Okay, this is not a Cadillac. Yeah, well, but it costs more money to build. It takes more crew to handle it. Okay, but a bark is much smaller. It's a Chevrolet. Okay, you only need like a 14 crew members to handle a bark, whereas here you need like a 35 to 40. Okay, because you have more lines to man, you have more sails to handle, etc., etc. Now, if we can see, this is a video that I found on how the conditions were on a sailing ship in the late 1800s, I think it is. You can see the sailors there, one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself. There's handling the captains. Yeah. Now, just imagine the people from Moravia being in the hold and being tossed around with the ships heeling like it's heeling here. You know, I'm wondering.
Is this a bar? Would this
No,
be a bar?
I don't know because I don't know. I couldn't see the whole ship.
I would say no, because there's too many lines there
Yeah.
for it to be a bark.
This would be a Cadillac.
Yeah. No, I was crewing the Elizabeth. You wouldn't catch me, going up that thing. I say, forget it, Fire me.
So how long it takes from Brennan to Galveston? How many days?
In a steamship, it was like 3 weeks. But on a ship like this, it would take longer. The first group of Czechs that came, I think that they left like 150 and arrived only 78 or so.
People?
Yeah. Now, I tried to do this on Google, but 4 years ago, it wasn't like this. Really, the route wouldn't be like this. This is more for a steamship than a sail ship. A sail ship would have gotten further south, okay, all the way down to Cuba, using the prevailing winds that go from east to west in Africa, and they made it first to Cuba, and from Cuba to either New Orleans and later on Galveston. This would have been a steamship route. Okay. This shows the arrival, the Neptune. You consigned to Kaufman. You remember me mentioning him earlier. Also the vessel. Now you see it's a bark. Okay. They lost 3 passengers.
It took 86 days
86 days.
for that.
Your question.
But the one farther up took 69, so it depended on the weather that you hit on the way and things like that.
And you see the other ones are barks, okay? Salt, which is a cheap commodity. The most are unbalanced. I mean, this one didn't make money, okay? Okay. Then I have also this is just after the Civil War. I think that's the first one to come after the. I thought it was America. Come on. I'm sorry, but here it is. 74. Yeah, that's the first one to come. Is the bar Galveston. Leaves in September, arrives in November. And okay, and then after that, you have the America, and now there's a steamship. A steamship is faster, more reliable. It can leave on time. It doesn't need the wind, to get here. It's not like the Missouri. I was just reading about the Missouri, which is a ship that leaves Bremen for New Orleans, and is hit he hits a reef in the Bahamas, and I mean the ordeal of those guys, and they eventually make it to Galveston, but the ship sinks, is hit by a hurricane, and then another hurricane, and they make it to La Habana, Cuba, and then from La Habana they go to New Orleans, and from New Orleans they eventually make it to Galveston. I mean, I figure that those guys, when they get here, first they thank God that they don't have more to go through, and then the second thing is, if we can handle that, we can handle anything. Let's see for another one. Then we have a group of ships. I think there is some incest here with my presentation. They come with a larger number of passengers, okay, except for the bark George Washington here. Let me see. The George Washington comes with 42 passengers, okay? The America arrived with 619. Okay, so steamships make a difference. Then you have the other ships here, the Gutenberg. Let's see. The Gutenberg has more. He has 100 passengers. But the Hohenzollern has 527.
The time also, the steamship from September the 3rd to the 23rd, and the bark is like 1 month or two months.
Yeah.
The George Washington.
Yeah. Then it continues on. Let's see the next one. That's the Brunswick. It's not here, but it's one of the ships that make it here. Okay. Let's move to another one. That's the Vesser. Now the Vesser is the last ship that I have on record, and it's the last ship that appears on this list. And it gives you, the Vesser has 449 passengers. Now just imagine how 449 people are in there. I mean, that's not a princess ship. I mean, they're sleeping in bunks. I mean, the Czechs had it tough because they went on steerage. They didn't have first class or second class. They were third class. They had to bring their own bedding. They were in the bottom of the ship. They were wet. There were rats, smell, stank. It was horrible conditions. And the food was I mean, they didn't even eat the meat. They said it smells and it smells so bad, you know, that we didn't eat it. But just imagine 449 people in that ship. So there were more. Now, it's 1887 to 1895. There was turmoil in Europe. Okay, so we have a hiatus there, and can we move on? So in 1896, we have the steamship, the Halle. I don't know how many passengers she brought. And there's the Halle. Now this a fancier ship. It has lifeboats. Okay, that's an. I mean, that's before the Titanic, but had lifeboats, and that's what I have. Sorry, I don't have more pictures of ships. There were no cameras in those days, you know, but it gives you an idea of what sailing in those ships was. I mean, look at the vessel. I mean, 446 people in that day. I mean, they were not having martinis at the end. It was awesome. So, and you don't have any questions? I brought my my advisor here, Brian, and we have also a genealogical librarian here too. So it was something else. I mean, it was a long trip. I mean, just imagine leaving everybody behind. They were leaving everything behind. They were arriving in a land with mosquitoes. I mean, yellow fever. You were quarantined sometimes. There were hurricanes. Oh, tell me about it. I mean, there was a lot.
So half the population would manage to make it above on these ships, right?
Toward the end, there were more survivors. I mean, toward the end, you have countries made a point of making sure that the ships, especially the Americans, you know, a consul was at the port before the ship left and made sure that the conditions of the ship was suitable to make the trip, and the conditions and the health of the people was up to par, even though at destination they also were checked by doctors, and if you look sick or if you were a single woman, you know, out you go. Thank you.
So I have a quick question for Irene.
Okay.
We started talking a little bit about this. There's so much time in the world. We didn't have that much time. But what are some common misconceptions from immigration from the Czech, or a lot of people coming from Bremen, Germany to Galveston?
Okay, well, just in general, whether it's coming into Galveston or into New York or anywhere else, because a lot of people say their ancestor came through Ellis Island, but at the port itself, they never changed your ancestor's name. The name on the ship's list was written back in Europe by the clerk when you paid your money to get on the boat. So if it's misspelled, if it's screwed up, or some goofy spelling, it's somebody from their own country not knowing how to spell that name and write it down. When they got here, they would change their name after they were here, at some point. I have a sister-in-law whose grandpa was Kriwauchka from Austria. He became Kriwaks because his boss in the woods in upstate New York said, "Hey, John, how is that you spell your last name? I'm writing out the paychecks." Kriwak, oh, to heck with it, I'm writing Kriwaks. And that's what he did. So people around your ancestors changed the names. Sometimes your ancestor themselves changed it to sound less German, less Czech, less whatever, because of sentiment here in America, anti-immigrant sentiment, which we've always had at one point or another about something. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is it got changed at the port when you got here. Earlier ancestors in the 1800s and so forth, they did not have as much to go through when they got off the boat as they did in the late 1800s, when they did start having the health checks and things like that at the port. So once the port officials had to send you through with the doctor and like that to check, and they were just looking, oh, you're limping, you know, and you're walking funny. You must have something wrong with your spine, with whatever. We're going to send you back to Europe. The shipping line that brought you over had to pay for your trip back to Europe. And if you were put in the hospital at like Ellis Island or in Galveston, the shipping line also had to pay for your time and your food and everything else while you were in the hospital. So that's why in Europe they started taking a good look at your health before you ever got on the boat. Because they didn't want to pay for you coming back because they were losing money, so they did that. And as you look at passenger lists, once they started doing that and deporting people because of the health and things like that, you will see things written on the passenger lists about that they were admitted, or you'll see it stamped sometimes or handwritten. Take a look at the end of the passenger list after everybody else's name on the boat, and you'll see some things about them being in the hospital, what was wrong with them, if they were sent back or admitted. And I have a friend whose mom came over from Europe, and with her brother and her sister. The sister got sent back, and it says admitted for the two and deported for the sister. And once you were sent back because of that, you were never allowed to come back to America. So one way to get around that slightly is to pay some extra money for a ticket for the one who was a little bit more sickly, because first class passengers didn't have to go through it.
Oh.
So if you put your sister who's a little sickly on first class and the rest of you went down to third class, she might just make it through without having to get sent back to Europe.
What was Ellis Island?
Ellis Island itself, and being called that, was 1895. Before that, it was called something different. And of course, right now my brain is going, no, you don't want to remember those words. For a while, it was around 1870 to 1890, no, not 95, 92, 1892. It was the other name, and then it became Ellis Island. And before either of those, it was just Governor's Island in New York. And you could go through like the Port of New York without hitting Ellis Island. Some of the boats went around the port because New York port is a naturally extremely deep port. So any ship of any size could come into the Port of New York and still can. You had a question?
Not everybody made it here.
Right.
What happened to those bodies?
Most of the time, they were buried at sea.
Oh, sorry.
They were put on a board, and the board was tipped, and they were buried at sea. It will say on the passenger list, died at sea. It will also say born at sea, and it'll be smushed in there really small that there was a baby boy born at sea or baby girl born at sea for somebody. Both get written on the list. Yes.
Are the Galveston records available just like the Ellis Island records?
Sort of. The port of Galveston, for other ports in America, they start with 1820 onward, because that was when the United States government decided they wanted a list from every captain who pulled into port of their passengers and the potential passengers that were going to get off the boat. Texas and Galveston was not part of America in 1820, so Galveston starts in 1846. But because of the two big hurricanes, the one that wiped out Indianola and then the 1900 hurricane, they destroyed a chunk of Galveston passenger lists from 1872 to 1894. The actual list that the captain or his first mate gave to the port official, those ones were destroyed. And so the lists that he had saying that, that there was this many people on the boat and like that, those are as they got on the boat in Germany and came over. And so it's lucky with some of those still existing and like that, because otherwise there's a big gap. 1895 itself, there's some lists exist, some don't, and then after that, and then there's also in the early ones, 1846 to 1871, some are missing for basically any port, because they would keep them at the ports, and if they didn't close the window, rainwater would come in and get them wet, or they would use them to prop open the windows, or there's ones that had been found like in the bathrooms at ports and like that over the years they just get destroyed, because they were pieces of paper that got folded up into little packets that are about the size of an envelope, and they would get destroyed sometimes. So sometimes you can't find them. And one thing that is a constant when you're doing genealogy, especially and with stuff like passenger lists and census or whatever, is crappy handwriting.
They were all doctors.
It's everybody, every clerk that was ever hired always had pretty bad handwriting, unless, now if you see a list of people's names that's beautiful, I will guarantee you, after 27 years of being a genealogy librarian, nobody is searching for those people. It's only the ones who are the handwriting's crappy. Yes?
How did the European governments see this departure of pretty large groups of people to the U.S.? Did they also get some benefit from it?
Sometimes they were happy about it, and sometimes they weren't. It depends on which groups of people were leaving. If it was the ones who were doctors, lawyers, goldsmiths, silversmiths, ones that had either had money or had skills, they usually didn't like that happening. If it was the farmers and the lower class and like that, most of the countries didn't mind that at all. They were like, oh yeah, you can have them, you can have them. That's why give us your tired, your poor, your hungry, your huddled masses.
So do we have any idea how many people came from the 18th to 1900?
We do. For Galveston, I believe there's something on one of those that has some numbers.
750,000 immigrants between 1846 and 1924.
I want to
Okay.
expand on your question. One maxim in shipping is that the cargo travels on paper, and people travel on paper. If you don't have a passport, you cannot get into the US.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. But if you were traveling, say, from Bremerhaven to Galveston, you had to present at least 4 documents. One was the passport. Second, if you were a man, you had to show that you had served in the Austrian army. I mean, this is for
Yeah.
Moravians, okay?
Yeah, all of the Germanic states, you had to have served in the military.
Yeah, you had to present all that. I don't remember if it was birth certificate or there were 2 other papers. And one group, the one on the Missouri, that had to get on the Missouri, couldn't get on the original ship that they were supposed to go because one member, a man your age, had a piece of paper that showed that he had done his military service, but it was not the correct paper.
Yeah.
So they said, well, if he doesn't go, we don't go, So they took another ship the next day, just passing some money under the table. And the Americans didn't care whether he served in the Austrian army or not.
Yeah. One of the other pieces of paper was the one that said that you were allowed to leave Germany,
There you
that
go.
you weren't leaving behind debts, and
Taxes.
that you weren't like necessarily running from the law, that you had paid your taxes, that you would get a paper from the town that you were from.
Yeah.
And in France, they had to do that too. It was from the Maritime office saying you were allowed to leave. You weren't. Now, did people get around that by just kind of running off? Yes, they would run off from somewhere in Germany and maybe get over into France and go and leave from Le Havre, because France didn't care. You were a German getting on their boat, whatever, you're paying your money. Or a Frenchman going over and getting on the boat in Bremen, he's a Frenchman going over. So you could do that some. But I will say, if any of you come over to Clayton Library, we're right down the road over here, and you try to tell me you want to look for the passenger list for your ancestor who was a stowaway, I'm gonna kick you out of the library. Because if they were a successful stowaway, they're not on the list. If they did somehow sneak on the list and were caught, they did get added to the list, and then I think they usually had to pay double. So, yes.
Are there any passenger lists from 1881?
For Galveston?
Yeah.
There are some that are, there's the Hamburg passenger lists that are, as the boat left Hamburg, it's a German set of lists. There will be some that are from there. There are sometimes there's also ones that have been just kind of discovered in the newspapers and things like that. Now, the Maritime Museum, are you the ones who have the ship database and information, or is it over at the Alyssa?
The Alyssa has some, so Texas Seaport Museum in Galveston has some of that. They have a nice little intro movie when you go there on immigration through Galveston. And then I think Texas Maritime Museum in Rockport, which is the state's, it's the State Maritime Museum, has some of that also.
Okay,
But
yeah.
I would start with this Texas Seaport Museum and find out what they have for the
Yeah.
database.
Because the two of them have been working on trying to find as much as they can about those who came in that time period the official record was destroyed.
Would there be copies of those lists in Bremen?
Bremen did have the same thing as Hamburg, Unfortunately, there's just a small chunk of Bremens because of World War I and World War II. Most of Bremens were either destroyed by the wars themselves or in some efforts to kind of, during that time period, to recycle paper, to use it for things like the war effort and like that. So they took some of those type of lists for that. So the ones that do exist for Bremen, what you do is you contact the Bremen Archives. And I think, 2 years ago, I met a gentleman who worked at the Bremen Archives at a conference here in America. And I think he was saying that they have been put online, but they're on the Bremen Archives website.
In 1891, same situation?
It would be, yeah, any of those years from 1872 to 94, it would be in that. Now, don't forget to check, though, to see if they went into New Orleans first. So it was whichever port the boat hit first is where they were supposed to give the list. And sometimes the boats would hit New Orleans and then come over to Galveston. So even though your person didn't get off in New Orleans, they might be on the list for New Orleans.
How would you know?
Well, the New Orleans lists have all been indexed in Ancestry. So come on over and I can show you how to get to them.
Yeah, you can.
I'm also interested in knowing if you only processed immigrants from Europe and Galveston, or did they also come from the southern, like Mexico or the Cuba?
If they came on a boat, they would have been processed in Galveston. If they didn't, if they actually were crossing like the Rio Grande, there were stations along the Rio Grande that they got processed at.
Since you brought up your list, did you rescue any of this, or was it mainly?
I don't think so. The Alyssa was mainly cargo.
Just cargo?
Yeah, so.
From what
I don't remember because it's not, I've sailed on the Alyssa, but, and they've got a great history database for it, but I'm not sure what ports this is. I do know it's one of the old steel-hulled ships that are still from that era that still exists.
Anybody else?
Tell us again briefly who you are and how to
Okay.
get a hold of you and how you came to be here.
All right. My name is Irene Walters. I am the assistant manager at the Clayton Library, which is part of Houston, Texas, Houston Public Library. So our official name is the Houston Public Library's Family History Research Center at the Clayton Library campus. We're just over here on Caroline at 5300, directly across from the Holocaust Museum. That's us. It's a little campus. And it's named for Will Clayton, who worked with Anderson and the Cotton Exchange here in Houston. And that's where he made his money, is with the cotton exporting. And his house at 5300 was given to the city of Houston to be used as a library back in the 1960s. So they moved the genealogy collection out here. And in 67, it started there. It outgrew the house, which is a 3-story mansion built in 1917. The methadone clinic and apartment buildings across the street were bought and knocked down. And our new building was put up and opened on Halloween in 1988. And so we've been here almost 58 years now in the museum district. And we are one of the largest genealogy libraries in the country. We do not collect just for Houston or Texas. We collect for the whole country. And we're in the top 3 or 5, definitely top 10, depending on what you use as your criteria.
Is the mansion still there?
Yep. Yep, we have 4 buildings. We have the mansion built in 1917, their carriage house, which was built about 1922-ish, which is now a big meeting room, and their guest house, which is in the back corner. And then the Clayton Library itself across the parking lot. We took the street and turned it into the parking lot, so across the parking lot. And their summer home was over in River Oaks. Their granddaughter bought the summer home. And
For
it was
one reason or another, I don't know why, but they also have a collection of cases, legal cases of the Cuban or La Habana,
the Cuban papers.
The Cuban
Yeah.
papers.
Yes. If your ancestry goes back to people who came to the Americas during, into areas that were Spanish colonies, so Texas, New Orleans, or Louisiana, and like that, the paperwork for that, while it was under Spanish rule, was stored in Havana, Cuba. And so they're called the Cuban papers, even though they are for Louisiana, Texas, Mexico,
The Caribbean coast of Colombia too?
Yep, it'll have some in there. There, we have the largest collection of the Cuban papers on microfilm in America, bigger than the Library of Congress's copy. And it is in Spanish, a little bit of French, that is not a collection to ask me to help you with, because I don't read another language. But we do have some finding aids that will help you. And if you go on the Spanish National Archives website, there's a finding aid on there that will help you also find stuff on it. Because they're now in Seville, Spain, the originals are. The lady?
When are you open?
We're open Monday through Saturday, noon to 5 on Monday, 10 to 5 on Tuesday and Wednesday, noon to 7 on Thursdays, 10 to 5 on Friday, and 8 to 5 on Saturday.
Call ahead.
And I get to sleep in on Sunday.
Look you up online, what would you just look up?
HoustonLibrary.org, and then go to, you can do it HoustonLibrary.org/Clayton.
Clayton, okay.
Or to get to our databases, I would go to HoustonLibrary.org/genealogy.
Oh. So
And
you have
it'll
all
get,
that online as
and
well?
we have a lot of databases online. We have the Ancestry Library Edition, Find My Past, My Heritage, and we have a bunch of them online. A couple of them, like Find My Past, you gotta come visit me at Clayton to use.
All newspapers.
Ancestry, you can come into any Houston Public Library to use, but if you want help using it, you gotta come visit me. And our staff is, we all know how to do genealogy and help you. Yes?
Does the Moody name go back to the German cotton trade, or it doesn't go back that far?
The Moody's in Galveston? Oh, the Moody's have been there, I think, since the cotton. Remember one thing, the Galveston, the Strand in Galveston was known as the Wall Street of the South. I mean, Galveston was a large cotton trading area, and Moody started the business of stock, not valuation, how do you say that?
Stock trading?
Trading.
Yeah, no, how you,
Commission house.
no,
The complexes?
when you say how good a stock is, okay? Moody started that.
Oh, yeah.
Stock rating.
Okay, ratings, stock rating.
But actually, he came from Fairfield, Texas, and arrived in Galveston just after the Civil War. He had been wounded, and they shipped him to Austin in the war, so he served out the rest of his Confederate service in Austin.
Landed on his feet.
He had a merchant business in Fairfield, and then the cotton was kicking off, and he got in on
That's
as
cool.
soon as he could.
Thank you.
And the rest is history, as they say.
That's right. And that's what we do. You definitely want to read these and go around. I got here a little early so I could read the whole thing. I was like, it's pretty cool.
It's
Yeah.
very well made.
Very well.
You didn't get to introduce yourself and tell who you were.
I'm Alfonso Duncan. I'm married to Eva, whose mother was Czech, and she was my girlfriend when we were teenagers. And when I proposed to her, she said, okay, but I'm not going to live in Houston because it's just barbecues and cowboys. But when she realized that there is a large Czech population here, I mean, she's Houstonian now. I work in shipping. At the beginning of my career, I worked for a shipping agency, a large one, Hansen and Tiedemann, that is not there anymore. And then I work in other fields, but at the end of my career, I went back to shipping, and I was working for a company that turned a 20-foot container into a tank. So if you wanted to ship, say, brake fluid from Houston to Peru, you didn't have to ship, little bottles. You would just fill a container. Or if you wanted to ship wine from Spain to China, you didn't have to send bottles. You just ship that thing, and there it goes. Or wine from Chile to California, that too. Olive oil from Tunisia to Italy, or apple juice from Germany to the States, the thing.
Did it stay clean?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's changing the way things are done. We were shipping at one time. One project I was working was with Procter & Gamble, shipping shampoo from Mexico to Venezuela in 20 containers at the time, but they went downhill. And now it does at the Maritime Museum. Brian is my boss. I expect a raise after this.
Standing in line. So right now we're closed. So Houston Maritime started in the year 2000. Jim Manzolillo was the founder. He was a World War II Merchant Marine veteran. Came ashore, became a naval architect and a marine surveyor. Built fishing vessels like they built Liberty ships in World War II, which was in segments, in of all places, Mexico City. And he would ship the segments out to the port where they were going to put them back together again. He retired. He wanted to start, he had all this ephemera and artifacts, and wanted to start a museum. And first he wanted to donate everything to either Museum of Natural Science or Museum of Fine Arts. And they said, don't have space for it, it'll go into our dark archives, nobody will ever see it. He said, we can't have that. So he started the museum in his condo, and his wife finally said, you need to find a place for it. And so he bought a house, which was a former Greek restaurant on Dorrington, at the edge of the medical center and museum district. They were there from 2000 until 2017. Jim unfortunately passed away in 2007. Harvey took the roof off the building. Then we moved to Canal and Navigation across from Our Lady Guadalupe Church. The owners of that building said, we're going to raise the building and build a new condo. Well, the building's still there. We moved up 2 years ago. We are currently officed down Clayton in the old Siemens Energy building. We're building out the new museum gallery and space in the East River development, which is the old Brown and Root property of Jensen and Clinton. We just finished the principal build out. The exhibits are going to be fabricated and installed, and the museum will reopen June 21st.
Oh,
Our gala will be the 18th. I need to get it done so I can get Alfonso back in there. He's one of our docents. He's fantastic with everyone. He's got a shipping background, so he can compare, what he experienced to what we have now from Modern Maritime. But I will keep in touch with the Czech Museum when we open. We'd love to have you all come by. So
are you going to have the credit for building those models? You yourself just sat there and, the models are incredible to see. You ought to go in there and just.
Yeah, we just acquired a few more also, which is.
It's just an incredible place to see.
We have the only,
Smithsonian grade.
so there were 8 LNG ship models built in the late 70s. We have one of 3 that still exists. It's on loan from MOL, which it was Energy Transportation Corporation. It was American flag vessels carrying liquefied natural gas from Indonesia to Japan on a break bulk charter through Burma Oil. So there's a bunch of moving parts. So BP and those people were involved. One of our board members is a former captain of the LNG Taurus. We have the LNG Virgo, which is the most famous ship of the fleet besides the Aquarius, which is a class ship. It's kind of nice to have it there. But we found out the other day that it's one of only 3 that are known to exist in the world. And we're trying to get the ship's bell right now for that ship. The ship is finally in the breakers over in Indonesia, being broken into razor blades, so to speak. And the harbor master wants so one of the shipping people over there wants the bell as kind of a sentimental bell. But
where's the financing coming? Is this
mainly donations and memberships and
Does the state?
we take foundational funding for our capital campaign right now, but that's about where that stops. It's a,
So it's all. it's
if
like
you talk to
we
anybody in museums, you'll know
Just like-
foundation grants are very, it's a long process.
museums,
It's a long process.
and for libraries. I
Because
mean,
you've got the plans all.
I don't want to get into
Yeah.
politics, but we're going to go through a
We
hard
just all
time.
need to win the lottery.
Exactly.
Give money to the Czech Museum to you.
So please ask more questions, view the exhibit. I just want to say thank you to Irene and Alfonso for coming today. I really appreciate it.
So you're still.